nation and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
The Bible prophesies that a world government will be formed right before the second coming of Jesus Christ and the battle that all of us know of as the Battle of Armageddon. We're going to talk about that world government today because it is being formed right now. First of all, let's take a look at the prophecy. The prophecy is found in Revelation 13, verses 1 and 2. Now, there are other prophecies about this, but this is one of the key ones. Listen to it. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Now, everything in this prophecy has meaning. For instance, the 10 horns mean something. A beast in Bible prophecy is always a nation or a kingdom. Always in Bible prophecy, that is true. So this is a prophecy about a kingdom. This particular prophecy happens to be of the end time, one world government kingdom of the Antichrist. Reading on. And upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was likened to a leopard. His feet were as the feet of a bear, and the mouth as the mouth of the lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. So everything in this prophecy tells us something about the end time one world governmental system. Notice the body of the leopard, the feet of the bear, the mouth of the lion, the 10 horns of the 10-horn kingdom, but all one world government. It's an end-time world government. In order to really understand this, though, we need to look at another scripture. We're not actually going to go there, but in Daniel chapter number 7, there is another prophecy using these same symbols. As far as I know, it's the only 2 passages in the entire Bible where these symbols are used. But in Daniel 7, these symbols are used in a different way. Instead of one beast, there are 4 separate beasts. They have not yet merged together. Now, the 4 beasts of Daniel 7, there's a lion with eagle's wings, a bear, a leopard, and a 10-horn beast. And it states in this passage in verse 24 that these 4 beasts represent 4 kingdoms that shall arise. And then also it states in the chapter that all of these nations symbolized by these beasts will be on the earth at the time of the second coming. Now, let me talk to you for just a moment. If you don't believe in God, if you don't believe the Bible's true, if you can understand Daniel 7, you will change your mind. Because in this prophecy of the lion, the eagle, the bear is supernatural proof that there is a God. Let's just talk about it for a moment. When God picks symbols to represent nations, he doesn't pick them indiscriminately. The first nation was a lion. Do you know there's a major nation today whose recognized animal symbol is the lion? It's the nation of Great Britain. If you go to London today at Trafalgar Square, you'll see right in the middle of London, looking that way a lion, this way a lion, that way a lion. So when Almighty God decided to depict these things to us, he chose a symbol that we would understand. The second beast is a bear. There's a major nation whose symbol's the bear. Russia is the bear. I think most of you probably know that. But notice this. Now, the eagle's wings were shown growing out of the lion in Daniel 7. There's a major nation today whose symbol is the eagle. Everybody knows that. Take a dollar bill out, take a look at the back of it. There it is. It's the symbol of the United States of America. And the eagle is depicted as growing out of the lion. Where did the U.S. come from? The United States of America came from Great Britain. So Almighty God, now remember this was written 550 BC, and the U.S. wasn't even born until 1776 AD. So Almighty God prophesied the birth of the United States of America and that we would come out of Great Britain. It even goes on to say, and I watched until the wings were plucked. Daniel actually saw the breaking of the United States of America away from Great Britain 2,300 years before it actually happened. Now, what else do we find out, though, about this beast? Notice in verse 7 and 8 of Revelation 13, it says, and it was given unto him, the Antichrist, the one world leader over this one world government. It was given unto him to make war with the saints, the people of God, and to overcome them. This world government is going to be hostile to true Christians. And power was given him, the Antichrist, over all kindreds and tongues and nations, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, except those whose names are written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So this shows a world government. Here it is. Power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. It's the prophecy of one world government. Now, it's happening right now. I'm sure all of you have heard the term globalization. Let me talk to you about globalization for a moment, because names have meaning. And you know, this word globalization just slid into the human lexicon back in the 90s, and all of us started hearing it. What's that? It's not really important. I've got more important things to do. But we kept hearing it, and before long, some of us were taken in our corporations to meetings where we were told, you've got to think globally now. We're moving into the global era, and we listen to it, and you hear so much. However, it has to be taken seriously, because here's the definition of globalization. Globalization is simply the process of moving from the nation state to a global government. That's all it is. It's the process of shifting the world from its traditional structure over the last 200 or 300 years of nation states into a one world governmental system. Now, the one thing that's really important, I want to make sure you understand, is that globalization is not some kind of a natural phenomenon whose time has come. That's not what it is. Globalization is a process that has been meticulously planned for many years. I'm going to prove that to you today, that this is not all just happening, that there is an agenda, there is a plan that's working. Now, before we leave this, I want you to take a look here at these two spheres. It's actually the same sphere, two copies of it, two sculptures in two different places. One at the United Nations building in New York, the other one at the Vatican in Rome. But they're both the same thing. It's the only two places in the world that this exists. You'll see the outer core is decaying and breaking away, but inside there's a new world being born. This is a depiction of the old order going away, the old order of the nation state, and the new one world governmental system that's being brought into birth by globalization. That's the reason this is here. Now, it's really interesting that this is only found in the United Nations and at the Vatican, because in Revelation chapter 17, there's a depiction of a woman riding a beast. The woman represents the Vatican, and the beast represents the United Nations and the New World Order. So it's very interesting when we see how accurately these prophecies portray the coming one world government. Now, to show you for certain that this is not happenstance, that globalization is a planned process, I want to take you back to some quotes that have occurred over time. Mr. William Benton was the Assistant Secretary of State of the United States of America way back in 1946. Listen to what he said. As long as a child breathes the poisoned air of nationalism, education in world-mindedness can produce only precarious results. As we have pointed out, it is frequently the family, that horrible family, that infects the child with extreme nationalism. This statement was made before the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. You may know the organization as UNESCO. Now, Mr. Benton went on to say, the schools should therefore combat family attitudes that favor nationalism as opposed to globalization. We shall see presently recognized in nationalism the major obstacle to the development of world-mindedness or global-mindedness. We are at the beginning of a long process. This was back in 1946, a long process of breaking down the walls of national sovereignty. UNESCO must be the pioneer. Why does the United Nations have an educational wing? Because they have to re-educate society to accept the new world order. Now, that's what's really happening right now. Here's another quote. This is from Mr. James Paul Warburg, February 17, 1950. And he was speaking before the U.S. Senate Committee on Foreign Relations. He said, "We will have a world government whether you like it or not. The only question is whether that government will be achieved by conquest or by consent." Now, what do you and I care what James Paul Warburg said? We don't even know who he is, probably. However, let me tell you about his father, and you'll appreciate why what he said is so important. His father, Paul Warburg, was responsible for the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. He actually was among those 6 or 7 very wealthy people that went to a little place called Jekyll Island in 1910, and they authored the Federal Reserve Act, which was passed in 1913 and took control of the nation's money out of the hands of government into a private corporation called the Federal Reserve Bank. It was a central banking system. It's when the government lost control of minting money. We don't print our own money. The Federal Reserve prints it. They determine how much money's in the system. They also set the interest rates. They can control the economy, rev it up, bring it down at will. Many people think the present economic crisis we're in is directly attributed to the Federal Reserve. So Mr. Paul Warburg was the #1 driving force behind the creation of the Federal Reserve. He also became a director of the Council on Foreign Relations at its founding in 1921. Now, why is that important? Because in the last 50 years, out of all the cabinet members, fully 50% of them or more have been members of this private club called the Council on Foreign Relations. No, it's not a governmental agency. It is a private club. And whether the administration is Democrat or Republican makes no difference. The same people end up occupying the cabinet. And that's the reason many of us are so frustrated, probably you are, that you vote for Republican and you get Democratic policies. You vote for Democrats and you get Republican policies. And you look at that and say, something is really wrong here. The reason is because the same powers, the Council on Foreign Relations influence dominates both parties, and that's true. Now, not only was Paul Warburg the driving force behind the Federal Reserve, he also was a director of the Council on Foreign Relations at its founding way back in 1921, and he was a trustee of the Brookings Institute until his death. Now, you're going to see why that's important as we learn more about the Brookings Institute as we go along. Now, Mr. Strobe Talbott was the Deputy Secretary of State of the United States of America under Bill Clinton. In 1992, 1 year before he became the Deputy Secretary of State, he wrote an article for Time Magazine called The Birth of the Global Nation. It was Time Magazine, July 20, 1992. And in this article, he stated that in the 21st century, national sovereignty will cease to exist and that we will all answer to a single global authority. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before you leave this point, he made those statements in 92. Bill Clinton brought him to the White House for the next 7 years in 93. And furthermore, he and Bill Clinton were college roommates when they were both Rhodes Scholars in London way back in their early days. One more thing that's really important. When Mr. Strobe Talbott left the White House in the year 2000, he took a job, president of the Brookings Institute. Now, why is that so important? Well, because the Brookings Institute, remember, was way back to Paul Warburg Sr. Now he takes this job in the year 2000 as president of the Brookings Institute. But in 2002, there was a lady came alongside as one of the senior fellows of the Brookings Institute. Her name was Susan Rice. Then when Barack Obama announced he was running for president in 2006 or whenever it was, when he announced that he was running for president, Susan Rice became one of his main advisors concerning foreign affairs. And then when he was elected, Susan Rice was appointed U.S. ambassador to the United Nations and gave the position cabinet status. Now, I want to make sure you really get this. This is critical. So this has been going on since the early 1900s, this plan for a one world governmental system for a new world order. And it's really important that we understand that. Okay, more knowledge about this. Richard Gardner, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, way back in April of 1974, wrote for Foreign Affairs magazine. I'm sure you read it, right? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But it happens to be the official publication of the Council on Foreign Relations. You know, this keeps showing up, doesn't it? Well, here's what Mr. Gardner said. We are likely to do better by building our house of world order from the bottom up rather than the top down. An end run around national sovereignty, eroding it piece by piece, is likely to get us the world order faster than the old-fashioned assault. Are you hearing this? Did you hear what the man said? This was way back in 1974, and he is blatantly talking about we've got to do an end run around national sovereignty in order to get our one world governmental system, in order to get our new world order. Listen to this clip from George Bush.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Now, here you're hearing President Bush Sr. saying that there is going to be a new world order. He said, if we succeed, and we will. He's very positive about this. Now, you're looking at a man who is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He was a member of the Trilateral Commission, and he was a full participant in building this one world governmental system called the New World Order. He understood very well what was happening, and he was speaking here, I think that was in 1991, after the fall of the Berlin Wall. He understood the importance of these things. Now, he went on to talk about Saddam Hussein and how that the war in Iraq was not the United States of America against Iraq, but was Saddam Hussein against the world. Now, listen to what he has to say in this particular clip.
Saddam was warned over and over again to comply with the will of the United Nations, leave Kuwait or be driven out. Saddam has arrogantly rejected all warnings. Instead, he tried to make this a dispute between Iraq and the United States of America. Well, he failed. Tonight, 28 nations, countries from 5 continents, Europe and Asia, Africa and the Arab League, have forces in the Gulf area standing shoulder to shoulder against Saddam Hussein. These countries had hoped the use of force could be avoided. Regrettably, we now believe that only force will make him leave.
Now, it was out of this statement that New World Order was born. From there on, we began to hear about world community, international forces. These were terms that we were not used to before, but all of these entered into the human lexicon, and we've been using these terms ever since. I'll never forget, in March 27 of 2000, I was leading our annual prophecy tour to Israel. We had made the decision to stop by the United Nations before leaving the United States so that the people on the tour could actually see world government for themselves. After taking the tour of the UN, there was a man who was going to give our group a briefing so that he'd tell us a little bit more what the United Nations was really all about. Now, I don't know why he said this. Maybe he noticed our badges that said end time or whatever. But anyway, he really felt like he had to clear up something. And here's what he said to us. He said, now, some people think that the United Nations is a world government. He said, it's nothing like that. He said, the UN is involved in global governance. And I was stunned when he said it, because I looked up the word governance before I ever was there. And I just couldn't resist. I felt like I had to ask the man without abusing him, without taking advantage of him. And so I asked him, sir, could you explain to us the difference between global governance and global government? He stopped and he swallowed a couple of times and he said, you know, that may not be easy. I knew it wasn't going to be easy because I'd already looked it up in Webster's Third International Dictionary. It has a one-word definition. The word governance means government. When you talk about global governance, you're talking about global government. And that's exactly what the United Nations is centered in. That's what their plan is. Now, we're going to talk now about some of the key steps to world government so you can see the progression and how everything is, in fact, happening right now. Way back in 1913, we've already mentioned it, the Federal Reserve was created. This took control of the nation's money away from Congress, away from the government, and placed it in the hands of the powerful money men of the world. That was a huge event in the evolution of one world government. Then in 1935, Franklin D. Roosevelt, our president, decided he was going to remodel the dollar bill. And on the back of the dollar bill, underneath the pyramid, notice the ribbon, it says Novus Ordo Seclorum. I took a little Latin in school. The word novus means new, ordo means order, seclorum means secular or world. So why did our president, Franklin D. Roosevelt, put the words New World Order on our dollar bill? He knew what he was doing. This is the man that became the driving force behind the formation of the United Nations. When he said New World Order, he knew exactly what he was planning. He was planning the same thing as Paul Warburg. He was planning the same thing as Strobe Talbot. He was planning the same thing as James Paul Warburg and all of the rest of these global planners, Richard Gardner, all the rest. He knew the same thing because they're all working toward the same goal. And the quicker you and I realize that, the quicker we'll realize that we actually are living in the time now of the fulfillment of the prophecies of the Bible. Now, carrying on, we're talking about the creation of the IMF and the World Bank. That also happened in 1944, just before the creation of the United Nations. This was critical. You have to control the economic structure of the world in order to set up a one world governmental system. So they created the IMF and the World Bank at the Bretton Woods Conference in 1944. Then the United Nations was born in 1945. Now, with the birth of the United Nations, the concept behind the UN was a global democracy based on international law. Big problem, however. Most of the nations there were not democracies. They were dictatorships. So here you have all these nations coming together, voting about the way the world should be run, and we're supposed to submit ourselves to a democracy of dictators. People saw the sovereignty of the United States of America slipping away, and that other people without our values would begin to control our destiny. And that's the reason progress toward this one world governmental system has really moved along rather slowly. Well, then in 1957, another very important piece of the puzzle moving toward one world government was the creation of the common market. The concept was Europe wants to go together politically. So the first step to that is to bring Europe together economically. They did that in 1957, and by 1992, they destroyed all tariffs between all the nations of Europe. They reached the point where they were totally unified economically. That was a very important step in the move toward one world government. Now, in 1993, knowing they had completed the economic union, they then held another conference, signed another treaty to form a European Union. That's where they decided to have a common money, a common currency, because that's another very important step toward the one world governmental system. Well, by 1999, they had their European currency, the euro. And when they formed this euro, they began to adopt it. It became so much easier to forget about the boundaries. Furthermore, now in Europe, you can drive from Germany to France to Italy. You can drive in any of the 27 member nations and never even stop at a border crossing, because they have found the key to bringing an entire region of the world together and to form the basis for other regions of the world to do the same thing. And once you get maybe 4 or 5 regions of the world together, then you can join all those together and eureka, you've got one world government. You have the new world order in power. Now, this is actually the process that is taking place right now. Okay, I want to pause right there. I want to talk to you about educating yourself. Get our Understanding the End Time series. It's 14 one-hour DVDs. Simply call 1-800-END-TIME. 1-800-363-8463. Or if you'd prefer to order it online, you can do that as well. Simply go to endtime.com. There's a place where you can order Understanding the End Time. 14 DVDs. You're going to learn where the United States is in the Bible, Russia is in the Bible, Great Britain, many other nations. You're going to find out which nations will participate in the prophesied one world government. You're going to find out whether the United States is going to stand by Israel or forsake Israel. You're going to learn about where the Antichrist is going to come from. The Bible's crystal clear on it. You're going to learn about the mark of the beast. You'll learn all about the Antichrist. There's 52 prophecies about the Antichrist. You'll learn about the false prophet, his religious partner. Matter of fact, we disclose to you who that is. We already know. All these things are in the Understanding the End Time series. And ladies and gentlemen, listen to me. If you've not been through that series, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you even believe in God or not. I don't care whether you believe the Bible or not. You'll take this course, you'll believe the Bible, and you'll believe in God by the time you're done. I challenge you. You cannot go through these prophecies. They are so supernatural. I'm talking about the United States specifically prophesied 2,300 years before it was born. I mean, these prophecies are so supernatural. They're so amazing. I don't believe any honest thinking person can go through these lessons without believing there is a God, knowing the Bible is true, and knowing the prophecies are coming to pass right now. Call us. 800-END-TIME is the number to call. 1-800-363-8463.
From Here to Armageddon, a new exciting 8-lesson series to share with your friends and family. Order yours right away.
Answering many questions like, how far are we from the Battle of Armageddon? What will happen between now and then? Where are we on the timeline? Your questions answered in this exciting 8-lesson series, From Here to Armageddon.
Go to endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-END-TIME. 1-800-363-8463. Order yours right away.
I know someone's praying for you can be cliche, and some might think that it's just a saying. But here at End Time Ministries, we actually are praying for you. Irvin and the End Time team begin each morning by taking your name directly to the Lord in prayer for our partners and requests submitted by each of you the previous day. The Bible tells us in Matthew 18, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst. We may not know each of you personally, but we feel like we are very much connected because you are one of the reasons that this ministry is able to spread our message throughout the entire world. We know this can be a very difficult time for everyone. That makes you partnering with us through prayer and your giving very special. Call 1-800-END-TIME or go to endtime.com and partner with End Time today. You can help make a world impact.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archives button.
The Bible prophesies that a world government will be formed if we can join the whole world together and have the destruction of the nation state, get rid of this horrible poison called national sovereignty, as it has been said, and we can have a one world governmental system under the process of globalization. So what has happened? Well, in 1994, the North American Free Trade Association was formed. It's called NAFTA. And then in 1994, that went so well that they quickly moved to a World Trade Organization. It was called at the time GATT. 6 months later, it was renamed World Trade Organization, accurately depicting what it really is. Also in 1994, a lot of activity in 1994, the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperative was formed. Now that encloses all your Asian countries into an economic union. And then in 2002, the African Union was born. Now watch what's happening here. The pace is picking up as we move toward the unification of the world. Then in 1992, there was a meeting called the Earth Summit. This meeting was designed to bring environmentalism to the front because the One World planners understood that if they could sell global warming and climate change to the whole world, they then could argue for international law because air goes across borders, water goes across borders, we all breathe the same air, we all drink the same water, and consequently, if we could get everyone to develop this new message called climate change and global warming, then we could begin to pass interlocking laws that would tie us all together economically. Now, it was at the Earth Summit in 1992 that Green Cross International was formed, and Mikhail Gorbachev became the president of Green Cross International. They now have chapters in most all the nations of the world. They have Global Green USA, they have Global Green Japan, Global Green Russia, and they're moving towards environmentalism. Now, that wasn't the end of this, however. In 1992, they actually conceived the Kyoto Treaty, a treaty that would obligate all the nations who would sign it to adopt certain laws and submit themselves to international economic and climate law. Well, finally in 1997, the Kyoto Treaty was officially adopted at Kyoto, Japan. Now, our government has not done it because we understand that that gives them power over our laws. Once we sign a treaty, then that becomes the supreme law of the land. And President Bush, this is one thing that President Bush did really right. He understood that we would be surrendering our future to the world community. He wasn't quite ready for that step. And so he refused to sign the Kyoto Treaty of 1997. War against Yugoslavia broke out. This was back in 1998, 99, and 2000. There was a big problem to joining Europe together, the big idea. There was a man by the name of Slobodan Milosevic. He didn't want to be integrated into the United States of Europe. So he stuck his heels in the sand and he had to be removed. President Clinton began to agitate for his removal, and finally he beat the drums of war until the United States and NATO led the attack on Slobodan Milosevic. Milosevic ultimately ended up being removed from power, and we demanded they be placed on trial. So consequently, the new government of Yugoslavia said, okay, we will put him on trial. President Bush said, oh, no, you don't. We want to try him at the World Court. The leader of Yugoslavia at the time said, we have no treaty to extradite him to you. And President Bush said, you better pass one in your parliament. They tried, the parliament voted it down. And still President Bush said, you've got to get this done, period, or we're not going to give you any international funding, which you need right now in order to rebuild your country because we destroyed it. That's how that worked. Well, in desperation, they decided to pass an executive order. Maybe President Bush, he liked executive orders. Maybe he suggested an executive order. So the cabinet of Yugoslavia passed an executive order to extradite Slobodan Milosevic to the World Court in Holland. However, Milosevic appealed to the Supreme Court of Yugoslavia, and they ruled that was an unconstitutional order and said, sorry, you can't do it. Well, it didn't matter. Now, get this. It didn't matter because helicopters swooped in that evening and kidnapped Mr. Milosevic and hauled him away to the World Court, where he was placed on trial. His trial lasted for 4 years. He died without a verdict. Now, that's what happened. This is international law starting to flex its muscles. Now, after the situation in Yugoslavia, then we go to the invasion of East Timor on its heels, and then Charles Taylor of Liberia. He was promised that if he would surrender power, he could go peacefully into exile for the rest of his life. However, that promise has now been broken, and he was hauled away to The Hague in Holland. And what am I talking to you about? I'm talking to you about world government forming now. I'll never forget the day. It was 1997 when President Clinton went to speak before the UN Assembly. And normally a U.S. president goes there to welcome all the world leaders to New York. And in his speech, I was watching it very carefully, in his speech, he said, you know, I believe the time has come for the establishment of a world court system. The one worlders just were delighted. Immediately, they shifted into gear. Planning began. And by June of 1998, they were ready for their International Criminal Court Conference. They met from June 15 of 98 till July 17 of 98, and they finished putting together the International Criminal Court Statute of Rome, establishing a world court that can try anyone on earth. Now, I think you heard me right. I'm talking about anyone on earth, you, me, anyone. If we are accused of violating the statutes of the International Criminal Court, we can be placed on trial without the protection of the U.S. Constitution or the Bill of Rights. You won't have those protections. What's happened to U.S. sovereignty is quickly going out the window. Now, the U.S. decided to withhold from being a member of the International Criminal Court. However, we slowly but surely are giving our approval to it, and the International Criminal Court is very quickly becoming the one world court system to try individuals there. As a matter of fact, in 2009, the International Criminal Court issued a warrant for the arrest of a sitting president, Mr. al-Bashir of Sudan. But we've reached the point now, could they in fact issue a warrant for the arrest of the President of the United States of America? Well, of course they could. If he were accused of crimes against humanity or war crimes, say it can't happen. Oh, yes, it can. In world government, the Antichrist is going to sit at the top of the whole thing. He'll arrest who he wants. I'm telling you, you and I are watching world government forming right now, and it's the world government prophesied in your Bible, and it is indisputable proof that you and I dwell in the end time right now. We're approaching the Great Tribulation, the reign of the Antichrist, and, fortunately, the second coming of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Oh, by the way, are you ready? I hope you are. If you're not, we want to help you get ready. Well, the World Summit Millennium Development Goals were passed at the United Nations Global Summit in 2000. They put together a program that all the nations of the earth should comply with. We won't take the time to go down through all of them right now, but it's really important that we understand that the agenda now has, the United Nations now has an agenda for all nations to follow in order to blend in with the plan of the new world order, the one world governmental system prophesied in the Bible. Now, a very huge event happened in 2005. I happened to be a journalist at the United Nations, and they passed at the 2005 Global Summit, 153 nations were represented there. They passed there what's called Responsibility to Protect, or RTP. It simply said that the United Nations now has an obligation. If a government is abusive, in our opinion, if a government is abusive, we have a responsibility to go in spite of that government, if necessary, overthrow the government, place the leader of that government on trial, and relieve these people. Now, you know this is all a matter of in whose judgment is there a responsibility to protect. Before this time, the United Nations had always been a government that only arbitrated between sovereign nations. Now then, they are claiming the authority to go into the interior, the inner workings of a nation and to exert its authority. It was a huge move, another huge move toward one world government. And Mr. Kofi Annan was very happy when he announced it. I was sitting in the press conference at the time, about 30 feet from him, as he was announcing, oh, there are some things we didn't obtain. But then he said, oh, I'm very excited to tell you about the responsibility to protect. We've been needing this for a long time. When they adopted that, that's when the last vestige of sovereignty was peeled away. And the United Nations took one more huge step toward becoming the one world government prophesied in Revelation chapter 13, prophesied in Daniel chapter number 7. And it's so important that we realize these things. Okay, let's go ahead now to the present economic crisis that we find ourselves in. Newsweek magazine on February the 16th of 2009 published an article, "We are all socialist now." Now, we're not watching the realization of the dream of Karl Marx, are we? Or are we? I mean, his dream was that the whole world would be socialist. And here you have one of the major publications of the United States of America saying, hey, we're all socialist now. The American people will never knowingly adopt socialism, but under the name of liberalism, they will adopt every fragment of the socialist program until one day America will be a socialist nation without knowing how it happened. Those are the words of Norman Thurman, for many years the U.S. socialist presidential candidate. Is that what's happening right now? I think we have to ask ourselves, because it certainly looks like that's what's happening. We're watching the nationalization of banks. We're hearing calls from our government for a global economic czar to control all of the economic entities of the world. Are we watching the establishment of the New World Order, better known in the Bible as the one world government of the Antichrist? I'm talking to you about world government forming now.
Okay, I want to talk to you right now. Is the time to educate yourself. How do I start? Get our Understanding the End Time series. It's 14 one-hour DVDs. If you've not been through that series, you'll believe the Bible and you'll believe in God by the time you're done. I challenge you. You cannot go through these prophecies. They are so supernatural. I'm talking about the United States specifically prophesied 2,300 years before it was born. I mean, these prophecies are so supernatural. They're so amazing. I don't believe any honest thinking person can go through these lessons without believing there is a God, knowing the Bible is true, and knowing the prophecies are coming to pass right now. So if you don't have the Understanding the End Time series, get it. Simply call 1-800-END-TIME. 1-800-363-8463. Or if you'd prefer to order it online, you can do that as well. Simply go to endtime.com. It'll be like somebody reached up and turned the lights on as to what's going on. You'll understand the present presidential election. You'll understand why the Obama administration is on the verge of turning over the internet. You'll understand it all when you go through these lessons. If you'd like to get a copy for yourself, the number to call is 1-800-END-TIME. 1-800-363-8463 and ask for the Understanding the End Time series. If you've already got that and want to go further, call and ask for the 13. 1-800-END-TIME. 1-800-363-8463.
If ever people need to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for End Time Magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will really impact your life. End Time has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that End Time Magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and leave them in doctors' offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine did in my life. Call 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME and get your subscription today.
Bible prophesies that a world government will be formed. It is being formed right now. Let's go to the G20 summit. This happened April 2nd and 3rd in London, and you're going to hear Gordon Brown calling for a new world order repeatedly. Listen to it.
But today, the largest countries of the world have agreed a global plan for recovery and reform. This involves the biggest interest rate cuts in history, the biggest fiscal stimulus we have ever seen, the biggest increase in resources in the history of our international institutions, with 250 billion more money than ever before for trade finance as well. For the first time, we have a common approach around the world to cleaning up banks' balance sheets and restoring lending. We are engaging in a deep process of reform and restructuring of our international financial system for now and for the future, and we have maintained our commitment to help the world's poorest, and we have put more money aside for that and also for a green recovery. These are not a single collection of actions. This is collective action, people working together at their best. I think a new world order is emerging, and with it the foundations of a new and progressive era of international cooperation. We have resolved that from today we will together manage the process of globalization to secure responsibility from all and fairness to all. And we've agreed that in doing so, we will build a more sustainable and more open and a fairer global society.
Mr. Gordon Brown is in love with the New World Order. He believes that's the answer to the problems of the world. Now, it's not just him. Listen to some other voices. Kevin Rudd has denounced the unfettered capitalism of the past, and he is calling for the establishment of social capitalism. Is there such a thing? And he's calling for the New World Order that happened January 31 of 2009. And then Mr. David Rockefeller, the president for many years of the Council on Foreign Relations, the founder and president of the Trilateral Commission. Many people think he is the economic power behind the throne for the entire United States of America and the Western world. Listen to what David Rockefeller had to say. We are on the verge of a global transformation. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the New World Order. Was that last year? No, that was 1994 as David Rockefeller spoke before the UN Business Council. He said we need that right crisis and the nations will accept the New World Order. I'm afraid the right crisis was the economic crisis of 08 and 09 because it certainly looks like we're accepting that order. Mikhail Gorbachev, we are moving toward a new world order, the world of communism. We shall never turn off that road. He made that statement in 1987. And in 2009, Newsweek says, oh, we're all socialist now. What are we talking about? World government forming right now. You're living it. I'm living it. We are in it at this moment, and the Bible prophesies it. If we didn't have that hope, if we didn't realize God knows exactly what's going on, we would all be very, very frightened. Now, President Obama.
The way we're going to win over the long term is not just militarily. We've got to win over hearts and minds. And what that means is we've got to invest in countries that have no educational infrastructure, have no means for young people to get ahead. We've got to give them a stake in creating the kind of world order that I think all of us would like to see.
So President Obama says that we are moving toward a world order. Is he talking about the same new world order as David Rockefeller, as Mikhail Gorbachev, as other world leaders? Absolutely. He is in favor of this one world governmental system. Listen to this from the Financial Times. This is when all the banks are crashing and all the economic things are happening. This was December 8th of 2008 from the esteemed publication Financial Times. The article was boldly titled, "Now for a World Government." A taste of the ideas doing the rounds in Obama circles is offered by a recent report from the Managing Global Insecurity Project, interesting name, whose small U.S. advisory group includes John Podesta, the man heading Mr. Obama's transition team, and Strobe Talbott. Where have we heard that name before? Oh, I remember. He's head of the Brookings Institute, where Susan Rice came from. He's the president of the Brookings Institute, and this is what he had to say. The article goes on to say, the MGI report argues for the creation of a UN High Commissioner for Counter-Terrorist Activity, a legally binding climate change agreement. Oh, they're going to make pollution a crime now. Climate change agreement negotiated under the auspices of the UN and the creation of a 50,000 strong UN peacekeeping force. Now the UN is going to have its own army. Once countries have pledged troops to the reserve army, the UN will have first call upon them. It certainly sounds like world government is developing to me. How about you? Some of these people participating probably don't even realize fully what they are doing. But we know during the campaign that President Obama talked about wealth redistribution, sharing the wealth. And while he was still a senator, he was the sponsor of the Global Poverty Act, which agrees to take 0.7% of the entire gross domestic product of the United States. I'm talking about everything we produce in a year's time, and give it to the UN to spend around the world as it sees fit. That legislation hasn't passed yet. It's already gone through the House. It's waiting in the Senate. It may soon pass. You talk about wealth redistribution. We're talking about a one world governmental system. We're talking about wealth redistribution, in fact. Now, furthermore, the global warming treaty. They're now planning on a new treaty that all of us will observe. Now, up till now, the United States has been standing on the brakes. However, no more, because we now have a president who's all for climate change legislation. He is a believer in global warming, and therefore he is ready to go. Furthermore, they asked President Obama, should the United States ratify the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court? Now, we're out right now. We haven't signed yet. But Mr. Obama said, yes, the United States should cooperate with the ICC investigations in a way that reflects American sovereignty and promotes our national security interest. So he is, in fact, in favor of joining the one world court system that you and I would then be subject to trial under. Now listen to Hillary Clinton talk about the present economic crisis and what we should do about it. Listen to it.
Never waste a good crisis. And when it comes to the economic crisis, don't waste it when it can have a very positive impact on climate change and energy security. And that's what we're trying to do.
So she's saying, don't waste a good crisis. When people are afraid, when things are being remodeled, then you can get where you want to go. She said, don't waste it. Listen to Rahm Emanuel say the same thing.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
I have heard President Obama make this same statement. We don't want to waste this crisis. It's obvious that in the highest circles, they have actually talked about this. Okay, now we're drawing all this together. How are all of these events that we are witnessing going to turn out? Well, one thing that's going to happen, there's a war ahead that's going to kill 1/3 of mankind. Out of this crisis, you'll see a total remodeling of the world and the very rapid ushering in of the Antichrist and his one world governmental system. Furthermore, you're going to see a peace agreement in the Middle East between Israel and the international community. Israel will build her temple on the Temple Mount. Animal sacrifices will be resumed. Then the Antichrist will stand on that Temple Mount saying, we can't have these animal sacrifices, and he will then claim to be the ultimate authority there. That's what's called the revelation of the Antichrist, and that's the event that launches the final 3.5 years to the Battle of Armageddon. Also at that time, every person on earth will be forced to have a marker number that they will need for buying and selling. And in order to get your marker number, you will have to pledge allegiance to the Antichrist and his one world governmental system. It's going to be, they're going to say we can't put up with these religious terrorists anymore. We have to have conformity for our new world order. We just simply can't tolerate and risk another war. Now, let me ask you this. What should Christians be doing about all this? And this is my most important question to you. Let me talk to you. Daniel chapter 11, verse number 32. It says, and such as do wickedly against the covenant shall the Antichrist corrupt by flatteries. But the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits, and they that understand among the people shall instruct many. Now that's a prophecy about you and me in the times just ahead. We're not going to be a weak, anemic church. We are going to be a marching, vibrant church. And our number one goal is they that understand among the people shall instruct many. We have to let people know what's really going on. Now, Jesus said about this day you and I live in, he said, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness, and then shall the end come. That's where you and I are right now, and that's what we should be doing. Now, let me talk to you about what you can do. If we're going to reach this world, you can't go teach others unless you understand yourself. I urge you, get through the End Time course. It's called Understanding End Time Level 1. When you go through that, you will understand Bible prophecy. I promise you. And then go on and go through Understanding End Time Level 2. That'll give you more knowledge. After that, get through our basic Bible course. And it's not really basic. It's called Understand the Bible. And then go through the rest of End Time University. If we're going to teach this world what they need to know and provide an alternate worldview to the Antichrist, then we need you to help us. We need to do this together. What did the New Testament church do? Here's what the Bible says. They filled Jerusalem with their doctrine. We've got to fill the world with our doctrine, and we can do it. We've got radio, we've got television, we've got the internet, we've got DVDs, we've got books, we've got brochures, we've got magazines, we've got conferences, we've got Bible studies, we've got End Time University. And ladies and gentlemen, we simply have to do this. Why? Not because the end time is coming. It's not. The end time has arrived. The end time is now. Alone we can't do it. Together we can do it.
Okay, I want to pause right there. I'm trying to say to all of us that we're in the end time right now. Whether we're willing to believe it or not, you can prove it. We have a brand new prophecy series come out. Many of you have been asking for it. Well, it's available. It's called From Here to Armageddon. And in this 8-lesson series, we outline what's going to happen. We do the big overview first. Then we back up and we take the major prophetic fulfillments that are specifically prophesied for the few years that are left between now and Armageddon, and we explain in depth. We explain where the prophecy is so that you can understand it. You're not just taking my word for it. If you would like to have your own copy of From Here to Armageddon, and I do highly, highly recommend it to you, pick up the phone and call us. The number to call, 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. 1-800-END-TIME. You can call right now and get your own copy of From Here to Armageddon. We're on the road to Armageddon today. In addition to From Here to Armageddon, we do have another DVD entitled World War III. It's coming. That one single DVD, you can have that DVD if you'd like to order it today. The number to call to order it is 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, please join us. Become a partner with End Time Ministries, because this thing is coming right down the pike. You've been listening to End of the Age.
End of the Age is a production of End Time Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. End Time Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.